Okay, are there any questions? Anything you want to start with today? This, you'll remember, is the sentence that was our practice parse from Wednesday's lecture. She threw every dog a nasty elf from Hadley. And we found a couple of ways of putting these words together using the rules we have, some of which are over there. In fact, we found two ways of putting these together. So in one, from Hadley combines with elf to give us the meaning, to give us a meaning in which from Hadley describes where the elf comes. Yeah, so it's a nasty elf from Hadley that is being tossed. And in the other parse, from Hadley modified this whole verb phrase here, the verb phrase that starts with the verb throw. And so in that parse, the meaning is something about, you'll remember, is about these guys getting thrown from Hadley. Yeah? So imagine that the border for Hadley lies right here, and imagine that I'm the gal throwing things. If I'm over here in Hadley, I would be throwing from Hadley every dog and nasty elf. Okay? There were those two parses. We sort of saw how they worked. And I told you there was a third. There's a third way of putting these words together. And your assignment for today, the assignment upon which your entire grade hangs now, was to tell me that third one. Did anyone find that? You found one. Okay. Shoot. Connect these two? Okay. Now, let me stop you here. At this point, from Hadley will modify elf. So this will be a sentence, whatever else it means, it'll be a sentence that talks about an elf from Hadley. That was one of the parses we had. Wasn't it? Or do I forget? Let's keep going. Let's see where it goes. Now what should I do? This guy. Okay. Right. So and brings two things of the same sort together to make another one of those things. Here it's taking these two and bars together. These two can combine. So the N bar we just finished making, dog and nasty elf from Hadley, can combine with every. And these two can combine now. A verb followed by a noun phrase, that first rule tells us can be a verb phrase. And et voila, as they say over there somewhere. We have a noun phrase, verb phrase sequence, and those can be sentences. So there's one. Yeah, and what does this mean? This means she threw this. What is this? Well, this is every dog and nasty elf from Hadley. Okay. She traveled a bit, threw dogs, she threw elves that were both nasty and Hadleyites. Hadlenians. Okay, good. So that's one meaning. I thought this was one we had last time, but irrespective of that, it's one. It's one way of fitting these together. Can we find another? There's a very red hat with an illuminated hand above it over there. Yeah. Okay. These two can go together first to make an N bar. So same move you made, but just starting with the adjective.
And join dog and nasty elf, same thing.
These two with and. Is that the idea? Like this.
Join that
Oh, I see, yeah. So now we've got an n-bar that's made up of dog and nasty elf. Let us hope we only encounter those on the board. And that n-bar can combine with this prepositional phrase to make an n-bar. Okay, so these two can go together to make a noun phrase.
And then take the verb through, make a verb phrase.
Yeah, and so again, now we've reached the point we reached before in which we've got a verb followed by a noun phrase. The noun phrase is different than the one we had before, but it's still a noun phrase. And so a verb plus a noun phrase, that first rule up there tells us, can be a VP. This VP can combine with this noun phrase to make a sentence. And what does this mean? So what does from Hadley modify in this parse? Dog and elf. So it modifies this. This is the thing the prepositional phrase from Hadley is joining with. So what's from Hadley? This. Dog and nasty elf. So here's the meaning for this sentence. What is she throwing? She's throwing things from Hadley. Every one of those things is a dog and a nasty elf. She is throwing every dog and nasty elf from Hadley. It's every dog and nasty elf from Hadley that she's throwing. Do you have this one? Not just elves are from Hadley, but dog and elf are from Hadley. Do you see? Is that okay? 3 meanings here. There's a couple of other ways in which this sentence can go together, but they don't deliver for us any new meanings, and so, well, I'll just ignore them. Let's do the slides now. Are there any more questions about this example? Bye. I was supposed to strip behind the screen, but I forgot. So we left on Wednesday then with this system that gives us a way of grouping words into phrases, those phrases into sentences. So we left with a series of rules that tell us how it is that sentences manage to be created from words. And I started showing you examples where there are sentences that the rules we've so far been looking at cannot create. And those sentences are ones in which something has been moved around. A phrase is in a different spot from the one that our phrase structure rules would put it in. That rule is the cleft rule. And I'll start today by looking again at that construction, at that property. If I can get the technology to do the right thing. Could you guys just sing some snappy background music, maybe? I thought, you didn't rehearse like I asked you to, the little elevator music?
You know any good jokes?
Do you know some good jokes?
Not that are appropriate for linguistics.
You know what? None of the jokes really are appropriate for linguistics classes that are also good. You know? Okay, well, I know. Sometimes you just have to, like, do the right thing here, which is, you piece of shit! Yeah. Yes, ma'am. A grandmother's joke for the last 10 years.
Keeps telling it to the family.
Is it short? Let's hear it.
So a guy walks into a doctor's office with a banana in his nose and a cucumber in his ear and a carrot in his other ear. And he goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, what's wrong with me?" And the doctor says, "You don't eat right."
Pretty good. Wait, yeah. All right. I don't get it. You laughed at that joke. But my jokes, what are they? Chopped liver? So here's the rule, the cleft rule. What this rule does is it takes a sentence that our phrase structure rules can produce. A sentence that starts with it, that has a verb phrase whose verb is, and then following is one of these complementizer phrases. And what it says is when you have a sentence like that, what you should do when it comes time to speak it is take something, anything, inside this complementizer phrase, yank it out of the complementizer phrase, and put it up here to the left of it. Make a new phrase with that moved thing as its first part, and the CP, the complementizer phrase that it moved out of, as its second part. So we looked at an example like this. "It is that you talk to the child" is one of these sentences whose form matches what the rule looks for. It's a verb phrase with is followed by a complementizer phrase. And the cleft rule takes that sentence, I'm calling that a D structure, and changes it so that, well, in this case, so that this noun phrase has been yanked out, forms the first part of a new noun phrase that's built in place here, and the second part is the complementizer phrase, well, without this moved thing. What we get is, it is the child that you talk to. Okay. Sir?
So that S stands for surface structure. What does D stand for again?
D stands for deep. I don't know why, though, because, I mean, what's deep about it?
Phrase that you're calling?
I guess. So I guess this is like down at the bottom with the sludge, and then it floats up onto the surface. I suppose that was the imagery they must have had. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's what we've seen. So, you know, what you're going to be presented with in this class as sort of a puzzle are, I mean, what you're presented with when you listen to sentences are these things. Things like this. And in order to kind of figure out what they mean, what you do when you hear sentences like this, what you do as a student doing my homework assignment too, is you've got to figure out, well, where did this move from? This is the object of to. Yeah? Though it's not pronounced there. So figuring out how sentences like these work involves figuring out what their D structures are, what they looked like before the cleft rule kicked in and screwed everything up. Right? So let's just step through how that might go. Oh, here's a longer example. I thought I would just show you that it can be really hairy. So here's a sentence that's gigantor. Yeah. It is that she said that he thought that you spoke to the child. And from this, we can get, it's the child that she said that he thought that you spoke to. Basically, it's just like the first example. There's a noun phrase inside this complementizer phrase, but it's way down here. And it's been yanked up into this first position. All right. So let's step through now the process of, well, recovering a D structure. What do you do when you see a sentence that the phrase structure rules alone do not produce, but one of these rules that moves stuff around has played a role as well? This sentence is one of those. It's an elf that she bought a book about. Okay. So this sentence is the result of the cleft rule. So what that means is you know that following is, there's going to be something that's moved, and then following that, there's going to be the complementizer phrase that that something moved from. In this case, I don't know why I decided to use the fancy slideshow thing today. I barely know how to even, pick my nose, frankly, much less. So, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm feeling very insecure. So in this case, this is what's moved, an elf, and this is the complementizer phrase that it's moved from. Okay? An elf is a noun phrase, so that noun phrase has moved from somewhere in here. So your job then, well, after you discover what thing has moved and what the CP, the complementizer phrase that it's moved from, looks like, your first job is to figure out, well, where did it move from in here? What you'll need to do is use your skill at parsing to find a place inside this complementizer phrase that a noun phrase could be, but isn't. The noun phrase that moved. So let's take a first step. So this is roughly what it looks like after the cleft rule. This noun phrase has moved, and here's the complementizer phrase that it's moved from. Let's get rid of the thing that moved and just concentrate on the complementizer phrase that it moved from. Okay. We're looking for a spot that noun phrase moved from now. And we could do that by parsing this complementizer phrase and just figuring out where there's a hole. And if we did that, well, this complementizer phrase starts with a complementizer. There's a sentence after that. Every complementizer phrase does that. Then this sentence starts with a noun phrase that has she in it. There's a verb phrase, starts with bought. Following that, this stuff is a noun phrase that starts with a determiner. There's an n-bar here. There's book, which makes an n-bar. And, well, there's a prepositional phrase. It could be here next to this n-bar. Starts with a preposition. And here's a spot where a noun phrase could be but isn't. That's the spot that an elf moved from. So let's put it back. Okay. That's the D structure. Do you see how I did that? That's what you should be doing in the last question for the homework assignment that's due next week. I give you a sentence that involves a cleft, and that's what you should do. Figure out what moved, then start looking at the complementizer phrase it moved from. Look carefully, parse it as best you can, find the hole, the place from which this moved thing came, put it back, draw this tree, and then apply the cleft rule. And you'll get the sentence you started with. Sir?
So one of the right is power parsing, even though there's nothing left.
Yeah. So notice that, like, if we look at the parse for this sentence, the result of the cleft rule, it's not a structure that our phrase structure rules could actually do, because it doesn't allow a prepositional phrase to have a preposition and no noun phrase after it, nor does it allow a noun phrase of this sort. In fact, it doesn't allow a noun phrase to sit here next to a verb phrase. Noun phrases, according to our rule, always sit right next to verbs. So there's a number of ways in which this parse is not what this sentence would be if we just used phrase structure rules. So the image we have sort of is, well, phrase structure rules characterize a certain class of sentences, and then there's some others that are variants of those. And those others are created by rules like this one I'm teaching you that screw things up a bit. Are we okay? Any questions about this? The cleft rule does this. The cleft rule says this. anytime you have it, is, and then a CP, you can take anything you want inside that CP, yank it out, put it over there, put this CP and it together to make a new thing, and you've got a sentence. Sometimes sentences that would produce, if that were really always possible, are stinkers. Here's a couple. It's Sam that you visited Sally and. Most English speakers recognize this sentence as crap. It's not a sentence of English. Yeah. What's happened? Well, Sam has moved out of this complementizer phrase that follows. And in fact, it's moved from right here. This started, it is that you visited Sally and Sam. No good. Similarly, it's Sam that you took a picture of and a magazine. It's probably not a well-formed series of words. Doesn't make an English sentence. It's ungrammatical. What's happened here? Well, the complementizer phrase that follows Sam, Sam is the thing that moved again, is you took a picture of Sam. That's where Sam started. You took a picture of Sam and a magazine. You took a picture of what did you do? You took a picture of Sam. I don't know what you did. You took a picture of Sam in a magazine. From that, you cannot get this sentence by moving Sam. Okay. Sir?
Would you be able to move a larger phrase such as Sam and a magazine without
So could you make something like, it's Sam in a magazine that you took a picture of? I don't know. How does that sound to you guys? Yeah? It's better than this, I think. Yeah, okay, so that seems like an improvement. Yes, sir?
Is that still considered an ungrammatical sentence? Even though we...
His?
Yes, even though we typically use that structure in conversation.
Well, so the notion of ungrammaticality is something like this. It's, do you find that sentence, do you find this collection of words to be an English sentence? It's ungrammatical for her. Do you, madam, find this sentence to be an English sentence? No. It's ungrammatical for her. If you should have a bad fall and the next day I ask you, again, do you find this sentence, this string of words, a grammatical sentence? If you should answer yes, then it's grammatical. It really is that. So it's sort of just a matter of figuring out, what do people think about these words? Are they sentences for them or are they not? You, if you're like me, spend a lot of time in school having good writers tell you which sentences are ones you should use in prose when you write. That's another task entirely. That's about being what? Smart? That's about sounding smart. Okay, so there's something missing then. So right now the picture I've given you is there are rules that create sentences. These are ones we can speak, but we can speak others that are formed by rules like the cleft rule. But this rule, as I've given it to you so far, creates sentences that we can speak that aren't in this set of sentences, but it also creates crap. We must do something to make sure this rule doesn't create these sentences. There's a very bright fella named John Ross who, in the middle of the 1960s, simply wrote down lots of cases like this, where things screwed up unexpectedly. He wrote them down And he stared at them for a very long time. I actually suspect there might have been drug use involved too. And he came up with a generalization, or a series of generalizations about where the bad ones were and how they differed from the good ones. And I thought I would teach you a couple of what he found. So let's look at one of these examples. So this is what the sentence, it is Sam, Yeah, it is Sam that you, It's not just Mr. Ross who seems to have some problems with the double. There's too many Sams here. So it is that you visited Mary and Sam goes to, it is Sam that you visited Mary Ann. I don't know, this Sam up here shouldn't be there. Okay, so just pretend. You don't see this, right? Yeah, okay, good. So here's an example where the cleft rule would have created this from something that looks like this if this weren't here. And the result is bad. What seems to be relevant here, is the and. So what Ross discovered is if you look at a bunch of sentences that have and in them, what you can never do is move something out of the phrase that the coordination rule, the rule that puts and in places, builds. You can move the whole thing, as we saw a moment ago, but you can't move anything out from inside. Okay? That's what's happening in our other example, too. So, one way of parsing that sentence would be this way. So, you took, what'd you take? A picture of Sam and a magazine. This is the take that doesn't mean this, but means this. Here, it's the object of the verb take that has two noun phrases brought together with and in it. And what the rule has done is it's created, something bad by moving Sam here, something that's inside one of these two phrases, out. It's Sam that you took a picture of and a magazine. Again, what's happened here, just like what happened in the earlier example, though the examples are a little different, is something has been moved out of a phrase built by the coordination rule. So far as we can tell, that is always not possible. There seems to be a constraint that prevents rules like the cleft rule from moving anything out of a phrase. It can be any phrase at all that's built with the coordination rule. Okay. Mr. Ross called that the coordinate structure constraint. That's what I'll call it too. Is it clear what I'm saying here? So this just records the generalization of which those two examples I gave you are special instances. This constraint, so far as we can tell, holds for not just the cleft rule, but for a whole bunch of other rules which, like the cleft rule, move things around. Not only does this constraint hold for all of those rules in English, so far as we know, it holds for every rule in every language, so far as we know. This, it seems, is somehow built in to rules that rearrange things, like the cleft rule does. Let's look at another example. Okay, so here's another sentence in which the cleft rule has made something that is just garbage. In this instance, it's Sam that she explained that how you talked to bothered me.
What is it? Talk to Sam on.
It's crapola. In fact, it really is bad. Yeah. What's happened? Again, Sam has moved. Incidentally, it's got nothing to do with Sam, the badness of these sentences. It could have been Sheila. Yeah. Where is Sam to move from? Well, where is there a spot in this large complementizer phrase that follows Sam? that a noun phrase can sit in? It's right here. Let's take a look. So here I've parsed the two things following it is into the thing that's moved, this noun phrase, and the complementizer phrase from which it's moved, the complementizer phrase following it. And now let's, that took a day. And then, we might have something like this, right? So here, the noun phrase, here, the complementizer phrase that it's moved from, right? And now let's just concentrate on that complementizer phrase from which Sam has moved. This how shouldn't be there. So this should be that she explained that how you talked to bothered me. That she explained that how you talked to bothered me. That's the CP that we're looking at here. Okay? And now we're on the hunt for a spot inside this CP from which Sam could move. So let's continue parsing. Here's that CP again. That she explained. Following explained is another CP. That. This CP has a sentence in it, like all CPs do. This sentence starts with a complementizer phrase and continues with a verb phrase. That this is a complementizer phrase might surprise you. We've not seen anything like this yet. This is a sentence, you talk to. And this word how is one of those things that can be a complementizer. That can be a complementizer. Whether can be a complementizer. And among other things, this word how can be a complementizer too. So if I were to spell out this, we'd get this. Okay. So this is the complementizer phrase that's following the verb explained in she explained that how you talked to bothered me. And here's the spot where Sam is moved. So this sentence started something like this. It is that she explained that how you talked to Sam bothered me. Can you see this sentence in here? So what if I just start with this? How you talked to Sam bothered me. Does that sound like a sentence to you?
Yes.
That's okay? And then suppose I make a bigger sentence that has that one inside it. So I say something like, I'm just going to speak this. She explained that how you talked to Sam bothered me. Is that okay? Is anyone awake? It's okay. Right? So that's all this is, this sentence right here. She explained that how you talked to Sam bothered me. I put that inside this complementizer phrase that's part of the structure that the cleft rule is looking for to do its thing. And what the cleft rule should be able to do is reach inside and find something to move. Let us see what happens if we let it move Sam. Oops. If we let it move Sam, then this is what's going to go up here to the front. Right? And what we'll get is, it is Sam that she explained that how you talked to bothered me. Do you see how awfully terrible that is?
Yes.
Okay. It should be possible. This is something the cleft rule could apply to. This is something it should be able to move. But moving this up here, no way. There was a hand somewhere. Yeah.
I was just curious, it doesn't really have anything to do with structure, but who is me referring to? Is it referring to she or the person who's speaking?
Oh yeah, good question. So if I say this sentence, let me make it a little shorter, okay? She explained that how you talked to Sam bothered me. If I say that to you, who does me refer to? Mm-hmm. Now.
Why is she explaining how you feel? Can you just do that?
She is very perceptive. Yeah. So she explained that how you talked to Sam bothered me. Anissa, could you come up here for a moment? Faster, come on. Okay. Could you tell them how sensitive I am about Sam?
Look, the way you talk to Sam really bothered Kyle.
Oh, so it is that he was thinking how you talk to Sam bothering him.
She explains how you talk to Sam bothers me. Notice she was addressing you, sir, with her. That's the sentence that's being described here. Do you see? So me.
Why wouldn't it just be it bothered him then?
Oh yeah, it's very true. So say it again to him.
Okay, look. How you talk to Sam really bothered Kyle.
Okay, now say this sentence.
No, you have to.
Oh. She has now explained that how you talk to Sam bothers me. Did we do that right this time?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good question. What seems to go wrong here, if we looked at more examples, what we would see is that what seems to be relevant about this sentence that prevents the cleft rule from doing this thing is that the cleft rule, in this instance, has to move something out of a complementizer phrase that's standing at the beginning of a sentence. A complementizer phrase that is, well, if you like, the subject of this sentence. The subject of this sentence here, how you talk to Sam bothered me, is this, how you talk to Sam. It appears that nothing can move out of complementizer phrases that are subjects. And so a way of describing that generalization, something that accounts for why the sentence we just looked at is bad, is this. Nothing may move out of a complementizer phrase if that complementizer phrase is standing here, the first thing in a sentence, the subject of a sentence. Are you okay? So the picture we have is something like this. It's a little complicated, actually. So we've got phrase structure rules that create sentences. The set of sentences that we command, though, are larger than those. There are sentences that phrase structure rules alone cannot create. There are some that rules can create, like this one I've taught you, the cleft rule. But this rule generates fewer sentences than you may think because there are general conditions on how things being moved by such rules are limited. And here are two of them. If the rule you're looking at, the cleft rule is the only one we will have in this class, tries to move something out of a subject complementizer phrase, then you will get garbage. You cannot do that. If you are trying to move something out of a coordination, out of a phrase that's built with and, that is always blocked too. These two constraints are part of a larger set of about, I'd say, about a dozen. In the lecture notes, I teach you one more than these two, for those of you who are interested. But these are the two I want you to know. Okay. Are we okay with this? Now, you may remember that next week there's a midterm. And I thought I would just remind you of that fact and also the sorts of things you should take a look at in preparing yourself for that midterm. The midterm will have no questions on the cleft rule or these constraints. Okay? So you can set those aside for a while. We'll come back to them later. But in studying for the midterm, you should know everything I've taught you up to this week. You should remember the International Phonetic Alphabet. You should know how to read it and how to use it to represent speech. How many of you have that skill now? Okay, that's about 12 of the 162 people enrolled in this class. So those of you who didn't raise your hand, yeah, go back and practice some of those transcription exercises. Know the IPA. Remember syllables and phonotactic constraints. So we saw a little procedure that takes a set of phones and tells you how those phones should be grouped. Gather up, find nuclei, vowels. Gather up consonants before those nuclei. Make onsets of those. Then go back and gather up remaining consonants that follow nuclei. Make codas of those. Check to make sure your onsets and codas satisfy phonotactic constraints. Et voila, you have a syllabified word. Okay? Remember that. I taught you some phonotactic constraints. You should review those so you know how big an onset can be in English. It has 3 phones, no more. You know what those phones should be. The first is sa, the second is a voiceless stop, etc., etc. And you also know something about codas. You know that 2 sounds in a coda have to be the same in voicing unless the first is sonorant, for instance. There will be a question asking you to figure out whether sets of sounds are phonemes or allophones in some language, words from which I will present you. So you should remember how to do that kind of problem. Yeah. And in writing rules, you should be able to use those phonological features. Do you remember the phonological features? What's coronal? Just think kiss. Okay? Coronal, kiss. Couldn't be easier. What's nasal? How are nasal sounds made? Tell me how. You lower the velum. Remember that? You lower the velum, letting air go into your nose to make a nasal sound. Go back, look at the phonological features. You'll have to know how to use them to write allophonic rules. We've learned some stuff about morphology now since the last midterm, and you should know that too. You should know the morphemes I taught you. What are they? What are the morphemes I've taught you in English? What are the affixes? Okay, good. There's re. What is re attached to? Verbs. There's sa. What is sa attached to? Every noun. Yep, everything, if it's a noun. Okay? There is un. What is un attached to? Adjectives and verbs. Wait, there are 2 uns. There's one un that attaches to verbs. What is it? Undress. There is another un. It attaches to adjectives. Please do not do that. Do not strip in public. Okay? It means not, as in not happy, unhappy. 2 uns, a re, a sa. A ubble. What is ubble attached to? And what category does it make? It makes an adjective. And why does it make an adjective? It makes an adjective because it is an adjective. 2 morphemes make a word. You look at the morpheme on the right-hand side, you figure out what part of speech it is, and that's the part of speech of the word you make. The right-hand head rule. Don't forget that. There's a difference between derivational and inflectional morphemes. You should be able to detect what kind of morpheme you're looking at if you know the things that distinguish those 2. What makes an inflectional affix different from a derivational affix? Derivational can change a part of speech if it's a suffix, if it ends up on the right-hand side. Right. Inflectional can't, even if it's a suffix. Any other things that distinguish derivational from inflectional?
Inflectional can be applied to any member of that group of speech.
Inflectional affixes are productive. If they go on a noun, for instance, like the plural suffix does, They go on every noun. There's every noun that has a plural form. In that way, derivational affixes are different. Able goes on verbs, but not every verb. There are some verbs like die that able doesn't attach to. You should know the phrase structure rules. You should know how to wield them to parse a sentence. And you should recognize how it is that different ways of grouping words into phrases can correspond to different meanings. Sentences can be ambiguous with regard to how the phrases in them are put together. There will be a question of that sort. And you should know what recursivity is and why it's important. Say what? What is recursivity? When something's recursive, what is it? Something is recursive. A rule, for instance, is recursive if... Oh, shit. If... Okay, so this touches... Yeah. So suppose we have a rule that says what a VP can look like. This VP, one of the things it can look like, see how startled it looks? Yeah. One thing this VP can look like is it can have another VP in it.
Wow.
And as a consequence, there can be yet another VP in it. That property is recursivity. And it's the property that allows, for instance, verb phrases to have as many prepositional phrases as you like in them. The rule that tells you where prepositional phrases can be in verb phrases is recursive. And as a consequence, that rule can generate sentences of indefinite length. The only thing that stops you is death itself. Okay. So remember at least the death part. Have a good weekend. I'll see you on Wednesday.